Trees that are green, red roses too. I watch them bloom for me and you, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I hear babies cry, watch them grow, and they'll learn much more than I'll ever know. And I think to myself, oh, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of the people passing by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? But they're really saying, I love you. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of the people passing by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? But they're really saying, I love you. I see trees of green and red roses too. I watch them bloom for me and you, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I think to myself, ooh, what a wonderful world.
Family and friends, welcome this afternoon as we've come together to remember and celebrate the life of Mac Russell, who died on Friday, June the 9th. Thank you for being here today to support the family and each other as you share your stories and say your goodbyes. For those that may not be aware, Mac has battled health-wise for the last 14 months with a brain tumour. He was always positive and always looked at life for when things got better. He never complained, never faltered in his fight. So today is as Mac requested, nothing sombre and sad, but a chance to celebrate, an opportunity to remember all of the wonderful times that you spent with him over the years. Mac leaves behind his beloved wife Marge, loving daughters Debbie, Kelly and Simone. Mac was a friend to Kevin, Richard, Colin, Mandy and Tony, Richard and Susie. A devoted granddad to Joe, Fergus, Adair, Maggie, Archie, Jessica, Sophie, Ross, Jessie. A loved brother, uncle, friend, mentor and colleague. On behalf of the family, I'd like to thank all of those that have called, messaged, sent flowers and cards and dropped off meals. It has been appreciated. Thank you also to those that have sent letters and emails from around Australia, from those that Mac assisted with business or personal pursuits. Reading these words has been a wonderful reminder of the family, how respected Mac was in so many areas of his life. They all had one commonality: recognition of a man who was dedicated, trustworthy, knowledgeable and ethical. Mac loved Devonport. He was always an advocate for progression and development, and to be here in the Paranaple Centre with his cars and with those that loved him and to celebrate his life is truly fitting. He was excited to see the changes that were happening with the city. Mac has dedicated his life to his family, business and community service. He was always the first to assist in any way he could. I met Mac many years ago when he was organising the Devonport Motor Show, and he ran a really tight ship. There were spreadsheets and action lists, and he was over every element. I soon realised that this was how Mac operated with everything. He was always the same any time you saw him, out walking at a cafe, out for dinner, cooking at breakfast in the park, attending one of the stalls or wandering around at the motor show. Mac was genuine, kind, humble, and always interested in those around him, what they were doing and what they were involved in. Mac was inquisitive. He had that little glint in his eye and could be a little bit cheeky. His smile, the one that you see on the screen, was a permanent fixture on his face. But I'm not telling you anything that you don't already know. And of course, Mac wasn't one to do anything in half measures. There are lots of people to share their memories and stories today, and we'll start with his sister June.
Colin Macdougall Russell was born on May 27, 1947, to Anne and Arthur Russell of Forest Hill, Barrington, a baby brother for Patricia, John, Bruce and myself, later to be joined by Noel. Our dear aunt took one look at our baby brother, declaring he was the image of Dad's older brother who was killed in the First World War, and his name was Mac. So Mac he became forevermore, often causing confusion about where the other brother was. Mac was the most adorable little boy. He was happy, compassionate, and these attributes remained with him always, and let's add charismatic and charming. Big brown eyes peering through under a mop of variegated hair, and he loved to ride all day with his dad on the tractor and was always filthy, dirty, believe it or not. Even when just playing, he could never stay clean. One of the farm workers nicknamed him Dan the Dirty Man. Our mother would say Mac becomes a wild thing when he's grubby. Happily one day, Mac morphed into a Mr. Immaculate and was never seen grubby again in his entire life. At 5, Mac began his schooling at a little school in Barrington. His little legs had 3 miles to walk there and 3 miles home. Life was happy, with the only demon on the farm at Forest Hill being a blue cow, a creature with an evil temperament and an intense dislike of small children. All was good because this creature was never in a paddock where we had to walk. One morning as we walked across the paddocks to school, our worst nightmares came true. Over the hill charged the blue cow. Fences too far away, no escape plan, Big Brother Bruce nowhere to be seen, Mac hiding behind me, terrified, and I knew that I must protect him with my life. As this terrifying creature was on top of us, I began striking it around the head with my little school case. It stopped, turned and fled. I had saved Mac's life. I never let him forget it, and he didn't forget it. During grade 3 at Barrington School, the school closed and Mac now travelled by a bus to Sheffield, no more walking all that way to school. At the end of grade 6, Mac passed the exam to attend Devonport High School, travelling by bus again. His favourite subjects were always the technical subjects. Mac's first venture into business was trapping rabbits, and so with skins stretched over wires hanging from his bicycle bars, he would ride all the way to Sheffield and sell his skins to Wilcox and Moffin. So he had 7pence on Thursday to spend, a shilling on Friday night, and with his rabbit money, Mac was in the money. Mac loved his life, learning to swim in the Don River, fishing in the White Hawk, wandering all over the farm daily as freely as he liked. As long as we were home by dark, it was okay. Mac's first job was feeding chooks, then gathering eggs, moving on to stick splitting, wood for the fires, thistle chipping, feeding out, picking up stones and potatoes. Growing up in a strong Methodist family, Mac attended Sunday school and church every Sunday, and later carrying on the family tradition of being a Sunday school teacher. Youth groups on a Friday night were fun. Mac had plans to become a minister at one stage. He hoped to join brother John on the family farm, but Dad said he must have a trade first. Through Dad's friendship with Walton P. Hill, Mac, without an interview, began his electrical apprenticeship at the age of 15. Because of Mac's Methodist upbringing, he initially found the work culture quite intimidating and difficult. But he soon began to stay back on a Saturday afternoon to have a drink with the boys. This posed another problem, how to get Mac home from Devonport without Dad knowing he'd been drinking. I would sit next to Dad, Mac by the window, wound down, freezing, so that Dad would not smell alcohol. Saved you again, Mac. It was much later that we discovered our father had no sense of smell. Wasted afternoons. Mac's first cars were Zephyrs. Stories they could tell. He loved them, but wrecked a few. Around this time, Mac met a young lady called Christine Walker. He went on to marry Chris and have 3 beautiful girls. In 1964, Mac joined the Army Reserves, 44 Corps Transport, and until the early 70s, he learned many important life skills and became a very skilled driver in all conditions. Good lessons that put him in good stead for Targa later. When Glyn and I married in Scotland, Mac arrived in Oban to be our best man. And when Marge and Mac married on Flinders Island, we did the same thing. Most of you have probably never noticed the little wings on Marge's shoulders. Angel wings, Marge. Marge, your care for Mac has been amazing. So much compassion and love. You were his angel now. Mac, you were our beautiful, loved brother, but also my best friend. I rescued you often, but as a little boy, but you rescued me right back often later in life. You always understood me. Mac, wherever you are, Patricia, John, Bruce and I wish you lots of chocolate, vanilla ice cream, coffee cakes, good red wine, and at least one Morgan. We will love you forever.
Thank you, June. I'd now like to ask Mac's daughters to come forward.
I will take this special moment to turn my thoughts to Dad, thank him for the home he gave and for all the things we had. We think about the fleeting years too quickly gone for good. It seems like only yesterday I'd go back if I could. A time when Dad was always there, no matter what the weather. Always strong when things went wrong, he held our lives together. He strived so hard from day to day and never once complained. With steady hands he worked so hard and kept the family name. He taught us that hard work pays off, reap just what you sow. He said that if you tend your crops, your field will overflow. My life has been bountiful. He taught me how to give. In his firm and steadfast way, he taught me how to live. Dad dwells among the angels now. He left us much too soon. He drives down a golden road above the harvest moon. I see him in the winter rain. He rides above the wind. And when my path is beaten down, he picks me up again. It was a privilege and an honour to be your daughter. It was grounding and humbling to see just how hard you worked each day. It was inspiring and incredible to see you do whatever you set your mind to do. And it's heartbreaking to lose you. But I will love you and cherish you forever, Dad.
Mac Russell was our dad. How lucky were we? What did it look like to have him as your dad? It looked like Tarzans and horsey rides, sometimes one on each arm being carried up the hallway and thrown onto the bed. When we were too big for Tarzan rides, he had an easier method of getting us to bed, and he'd simply come out, clap his hands and say, "Time to shut up shop, Susies," and off we'd go, no questions asked. Our childhood is full of great dad memories, building things in the workshop, surfing in the back of the bongo bus on the way to the tip. The originals from Russell Smith will understand what that means. Backyard cricket and netball, Sunday drives, jumping the ditch to pick up apples, tree houses that Dad built, rescuing animals, and Dad rescuing us from animals such as snakes and some pigs that one day chased us up through the paddocks. Dad had regular snoozers on the couch. Don't wake Dad, he just needs 10 minutes. These snoozers were fraught with danger. We would sneak around behind him and pull up his eyebrows or pile him up with soft toys and he'd wake up with them on top of him. There'd be Smurfs and teddy bears. That was the only time we ever saw him mildly annoyed. He never got mad, ever, at anything. Not that there weren't consequences for our actions if we did the wrong thing. Manners around the dinner table were really important. Every night at dinner we'd have to endure the anxiety-inducing "what did you learn at school today" moment. Everyone had their turn and passing wasn't an option. If one of us or all of us got the giggles, we would be sent from the table to compose ourselves, and only then could we return. More decorum would be his only comment. Dad said you needed to know your audience and have a sense of occasion. That was really important. Dad had his hands full with 3 daughters, but he always remained calm and had a great sense of humour. He could fix anything, from broken toys, bikes, cars and shoes, even broken hearts and fractured friendships. He guided us to make our own decisions and to own them. He would nod slowly, ask questions and force you to think. But every now and again, he'd pull a strategic dad move and tell you what the plan was. You are going to boarding school, you are finishing your uni degree, or you are taking that job at the bank, and you did what he told you to do. He was always right, and these big decisions continue to shape our lives today. Our dad had many superpowers, but one of them was that he saw things in you that you didn't see in yourself, and he was clear that you don't have to be in a hurry to get to where you need to go or to be who you want to be. But you did need a plan. That was important. You must have a plan. No winging it. A plan must be had.
Yes, good. Dad gave great advice, and always the right advice. You must have extension cords of every length to cater for every occasion. Your batteries always needed to be charged. You can never have too many PowerPoints. And mood lighting is important, and therefore dimmers are essential. He had a few memorable sayings that we all live by today. Some classic dad quotes are, "You're only as good as your last performance, so bow out on a high." "Someone always has to pay. Money doesn't grow on trees." "My people will talk to your people," which more recently that meant he would check with Marge to see what the plan was. "And how do we make that happen?" which means, how are you going to make that happen for him? Walking around with Dad, even as an adult, was tricky. His long strides meant that we would have to walk at a slow jog just to keep up with him. None of us got his height. Walking around Devonport with Dad meant lots of stops and lots of stories about houses and the people who lived in them, how and when the silos were built, history about the bridge and the river and the buildings he worked on as an apprentice. Everyone who knew Dad loved him. We felt it everywhere we went with him. All of the messages we have received about Dad show how widely he was loved and respected, and the words we are hearing are legend, genuine, kind, gentleman and storyteller. He was joyous. Looking through all the photos of Dad, he always had the biggest smile. His family and his community were very important to him. There's one paragraph to go. One night on the deck at Hawley, I had a deeper meaningful with Dad about his life, and I asked what his secret was, and his answer was good people. As always, he was right. We're not sure he realised he was good people to everyone he met. His final words in his Father of the Bride speech at Simone's wedding was, "It's not the people in your life, it's the life in the people." And Dad had so much life and lived it to the fullest. People say that you never know what you had until it's gone. We always knew what we had: an adventurous, smart, honest, kind, generous gentleman as a father. We love you, Dad.
I'd like to ask the grandchildren to come forward now.
Hi everyone. For those who don't know us, my name's Jess. Myself, Maggie and Adair would like to say a few words on behalf of Mac's 9 grandchildren: Joe, Ross, Jessie, Fergus, Sophie, Archie and ourselves. To Joe, Fergus, Maggie, Adair and Archie, he was always Grandad. To Ross, Jessie, Sophie and I, he was Mackie, Grandad Mac, and then simply Mac as we got older. Mac never did anything halfway. When we were younger, he spent a lot of time at Hawley Beach digging holes and making sandcastles with our child-sized plastic buckets and spades. Mac, however, would come down with his large garden shovel and show us how to dig a proper size hole. Even his train set up in the downstairs garage was kitted out to perfection. When we were younger, rushing to the train set was one of the first things we always did. Now, don't get me wrong, there was a strictly no-touching policy. However, we were allowed to press the buttons that controlled the trains under strict supervision, of course, and watch the trains go round and round. This would entertain us for hours. Growing up in Sydney, Sophie and myself were often sent down to Devonport to stay with Namma and Mac during the school holidays when Mum and Dad were working. For us, these trips were always very special and full of adventure. Some of my core memories from these trips include running around the mazes at Tasmania, walking through the row of family trees and spotting the platypus at the arboretum, picking fresh raspberries and strawberries at the berry patch, and then simply enjoying a sausage roll or scallop pie at any local bakery or cafe on the way home. Now, it wouldn't be right if I stood here and didn't at least mention his cars once. Over the years, we saw the car collection grow, and every time I spoke with him, I'd always joke about, well, how many is it now, Mac? You need a few more to fill that garage mahal of yours. As young kids, we were too small to actually ride in the cars, so we'd just sit in the driver's seat pretending to drive them ourselves. As we got older and were finally tall enough to sit in the passenger seat, actually going for a drive was very exciting. Some of my fondest memories of Mac were going for drives in Old Blue together. Every time we reached a hill, we would chant, "Come on, Old Blue, come on, Old Blue, you can do it." He would always say, "Jess, we might need Namma to come rescue us. I don't think we'll make it," but we always did. To the boys, he was forever a legend, a wealth of knowledge on a broad range of topics, from the best tools for the job to sound advice around career choices. Mac was always interested in their next chapter, whether it was changing jobs, buying farms, new cars, or debating over DeWalt or Makita tools. And Mac was indeed a Makita tool man. On behalf of us, I'd like to say thank you, Mac. Thank you for the laughs, your kindness and generosity. Thank you for always listening and providing us with many great words of wisdom, inspiring insight and advice, especially as we got older. We all watched Mac and Namma do life together, and it was a great life. Thank you for being someone we can all admire and for showing us how to always look on the positive side of life. I know that is something I will personally be taking forward with me for the rest of mine. We will all miss you so very dearly, and I know that you're watching us from wherever you are now with a proud smile. Thank you.
Today we gather to celebrate and say goodbye to our beloved Granddad, who will live on forever in our hearts. Granddad was an extremely generous man of great character, strength, fairness and kindness. His spirit is intangible and can be felt in moments of everyday life. When you try something new, when you feel a sense of success, and when we come together as a family. My granddad was optimistic. Though he isn't here physically, in the quiet you can still imagine what my granddad would do. That he would want you to keep going and keep fighting. He lived a life full of laughter, joy, wisdom and love that inspired us all. We each hold dear the special stories and moments of pure fun, excitement and adventure that will be with us forever. Hawley has always been a special and safe place for me and all my cousins, especially when my granddad was there. The place itself is peaceful, but my granddad always put me at ease, where I knew nothing could go wrong if he was there. One afternoon, he took me for a drive in one of his cars, and I remember it being one of the most peaceful afternoons I've ever had. Driving through the fields where it felt like we were the only people for kilometres, I remember coming back and feeling so at ease with life, and I owe it all to him. On that drive, he shared a small piece of wisdom with me, and I am so fortunate to have received it. He taught me that when you work hard and pursue your passions, you can achieve anything you want.
When I look at photos of Grandad holding me as a baby, it's so clear he loved us all so much and was so overjoyed to be holding the next generation of Russells. He always encouraged us to have a childlike wonder, even in adulthood, which is something that really inspired me, to not take life too seriously and ultimately treasure the hobbies and collectibles that bring me the same sense of wonder. I vividly remember playing in the fairy garden at Devonport that he built for us, and you could almost believe there were fairies hiding in the trees and the flowers. It was so magical. He really knew how to excite us by showing us all the new toys that he would buy himself, from train sets to life-size cars. A day with Grandad was guaranteed to be fun. He definitely knew how to live life right. We will miss Grandad dearly, and I can already feel him towering over me, curious about what life will have in store. We will always cherish the memories we shared with him and all he did, the joy rides, the endless knowledge, showing us the world through his eyes unapologetically. We'll remember his smile, his warm embrace as he lifted us off the ground, and unconditional love for his family and friends. And we take comfort in knowing he lived a whole and meaningful life. He leaves behind a legacy of love, kindness, and generosity that will continue to inspire us for years to come. Rest in peace, Grandad. We will love you forever and be inspired by your life.
Thank you for that. I'd like to ask Rick Rockcliffe to come forward now.
I'd like to thank the family for allowing me this opportunity to say a few words about my lifelong friend Mac. And that's a friendship that's gone on to the next generation, and we're really pleased about that. Anyway, I first met Mac approximately about 1970 at a gambling night at our place at Sassafras, when it was still, the house was still pretty rugged, and it was a combined, I think it was a combined event between Rotary, Apex and Lions, and it was a fundraiser, and Mac came along, and we had all sorts of gambling going on there, mostly illegal, crown and anchor and all sorts of things. But we also had lyre dice. And for those of you who don't know, lyre dice is a game, it's a British Army game, and I guess that's where Mac learned to play it with his stint in the reserve services. And it really relies on certainly luck, but being able to lie very convincingly so people believe you even though you're talking BS. And I gravitated round to the table, and Mac was sitting on the other side, and after a couple of rounds around the table I thought, bloody hell, here's a guy you've got to watch. Because he was very good at the game, and we continued doing that right until, well, the rest of our lives basically. And Mac and I started off a formal little club, and we'd go out to dinner once every 2 months and play lyre dice with a small group of friends and dress up in dinner suits, and a lot of protocol, which Mac loved. And we had many extremely enjoyable nights, and Mac kept the records of the dicemen, as we called it, in a handwritten leather-bound book. And that's quite something. He always thought it should go into some historical society when we all died, but time will tell. Anyhow, Mac joined Apex after that, and he was one of the most probably successful Apex members Latrobe Club ever had. During his time there, he held all the different portfolios of President, Treasurer and Secretary, and lots of committees. And some of his attributes were really, in his early life, was already showing through. He had great leadership skills. He could talk to anybody without talking up or talking down to anybody, which is a great skill. And a great sense of humour. And the Apex Club in those days, I think we had 30 odd members, and they were a pretty dynamic group of guys who all went on, and a lot of them did other bigger and better things. But particularly down at Bell's Parade, if you go to Bell's Parade today, Mac's handiwork is still evident down there. He was responsible for getting the bark hut built, which is where people can have barbecues and things like that, to this day. And also, in those days, the river was almost completely grown over with willow trees and logs and rubbish. And Mac and I were down there one evening and thought, well, to make better use of the river during Henley on the Mersey, which was a big event, we needed to clean the river out, which was a gigantic task. But anyway, Mac, through his contacts, I won't say but he persuaded the Devonport Marine Board to lend us their huge big grab all. And all we had to pay for was, I think, the diesel and the operator. Anyway, over next month, we cleaned out the entire river from bank to bank and piled all the debris up on the far side down at, and it was at least 10 metres high and about 100 metres wide, all this rubbish. And all the locals would come down there at evening, oh, the ruined Bell's Parade, blah, blah, blah. And Mac would say, well, you can't make an omelette without cracking eggs, and which turned out to be very true. Then we got a grant through the council to rock wall the other side, and anyway, that's what it's like today, and he was largely responsible for all that work. In those early days, none of us had much money. Mac and I were both restoring old houses, and our pleasures were really with the family barbecues, and we did quite a bit of bushwalking, sometimes just Mac and I, or other times with the family, and beer drinking, and all those things you did in those days. Simple for things which we all got a lot of fun out of. We eventually both built a swimming pool, and we had many social events around our swimming pools. But they were great times, and Max, I think things I remember was his generosity. His attention to detail was fantastic. I mean, this Chronicles of the Diceman, it's really a work of art. He was kind and he was generous, and these are the qualities he exuded. And some of our sayings were together: quality is remembered long after price is forgotten. And that's so true about everything, really. Anyway, you'll all have special remembrances of Mac, and we'll all think of these things in years to come, and the little things he told us or he did. And I don't think any man can have any greater legacy than that. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Today we have 2 photo presentations. This first one celebrates Mac and his family.
I have a dream, a song to sing, to help me cope with anything. If you see the wonder of a fairy tale, you can take the future, even if you fail. I believe in angels, something good in everything I see. I believe in angels, when I know the time is right for me, I'll cross the street. I have a dream, I have a dream, a fantasy.
when troubles come and my heart burdened be, then I am still and wait here in the silence until you come and sit a while with me. You raise me up so I can stand on mountains. You raise me up to walk on stormy seas. I am strong when I am on your shoulders. You raise me up to more than I can be. You raise me up so I can stand on mountains. You raise me up to walk on stormy seas. I am strong when I am on your shoulders. You raise me up to more than I can be. You raise me up so I can stand on mountains. You raise me up to walk on stormy seas. I am strong when I am on your shoulders. Raise me up to more than I can be. You raise me up so I can stand on mountains. You raise me up to walk on stormy seas. I am strong when I am on your shoulders. You raise me up to more than I can be. You raise me up to more than I can be.
Mac surrounded himself with wonderful people. He built a successful business, was involved in numerous committees, clubs and associations. Mac loved and participated in Targa and was a dedicated member of Rotary. Those that are now going to follow all have stories about these areas of Mac's life outside his family and the things that he involved himself in. And I'd like to ask Stephen Sims to come forward first.
Hello. I feel incredibly honoured to stand here and share some stories surrounding the years of involvement Mac Russell had enjoying being a part of Targa Tasmania. Mac's first Targa was in 1993 alongside his business partner Neville Smith. Immediately Mac was addicted and competed in every Targa he could through to 2021. Sadly, Mac never had the opportunity to compete in Targa's 30-year anniversary in 2022 due to the notification of the condition that it would eventually take his life 14 months later. From the beginning through to the end of a Targa event, Mac would change. He would don his cuckoo feather cap, an angle of feather depended on the necessary pace he needed to tackle a competitive stage to achieve his Targa times. These times are what was needed to obtain his coveted Targa plate for completing the event in the required time set out by the organisers for the relevant vehicles. On would go the helmet. The beaming smile he always had would turn to more of a Fangio face of grit and determination. Out of the stage, Mac would appear, always easily meeting the time required. Off would come the helmet, the smile would return, the cuckoo feather would get a tweak, and away he would go in the direction of more competition. There are many funny stories I could share, but there isn't the time for them all right now. But I must tell you some of my favourites. Many people might not know there is a percentage of a Morgan car that is made out of timber. Very rare mountain ash, according to Mac, but I do question that because I would say looking at this picture is more likely balsa wood. Wouldn't you all agree? Another thing we take from that picture, Smithy's not in the passenger side. Every second service was carried out at a carpenter shop and the toolkit had nails and a timber rasp. This meant that Mac was always concerned about termites. In the first day of Targa, you competed at Georgetown where you were timed to gain your seeding for your road order for the remainder of the event. In the weeks leading up to the event, I jokingly warned Mac of an outbreak of termites due to timber export operations at the Georgetown wharf. This made Mac nervous going down to Georgetown. Little did he know what would happen next. Off they went, Mac and Marge cruising through the streets at Mac's calculated pace to ensure his position in the field would be suitable for the week to follow. Up through the gears, winding onto the main street, lifting his hand to wave to the hundreds of spectators in Mac's style lining the road. Bang, the Morgan failed. Mac rolled slowly along the road and pulled off into a car park. Little did he know I just happened to be standing on the other side of the road spectating. So I jumped the fence, ran across the road, reached into the car, fixed a wire, and whammo, he was away. That night he asked me, how did I fix it? I explained that the car had a termite infestation. I had reached under the car and sprayed it with Mortine. Mac continued on through the event as nothing had happened. Well, what was happened the next year was really a mystery. Again, Mac is hustling along through the streets of Georgetown. Again, exactly the same place, the Morgan stops. And what would you know, again, I am spectating in the same spot. I walk across the street, wobble some wires, and once again the Morgan fires up and continues on. Mac and I discussed these events later, and the chances of this happening twice was absolutely unheard of. Maybe it was termites. In 2020, Mac called me requesting rally safe services for the City of Devonport Santa Tour. At first, with rally safe being a safety device, I inquired as to why he would need it. What if Santa falls out the back of my car, was his reply. And then on he went to explain that by using rally safe, the children could view Santa touring the streets and be aware of when he would turn up at their house. Mac's mini Targa, we called it. There are countless stories and many laughs that was just as big a part of Targa as was the competition. Mac loved being a part of the Targa family. Mac entered and competed in Targa Tasmania in the true spirit of the event. Rest in peace, Mac Russell.
Thank you, Stephen. I'd like to ask Royce Fairbrother to come forward now.
Mac and I first met through our various business ventures. Mac and Neville had just got together as electrical contractors a little bit down the road from where we were at number 8 Stony Rise Road in Coiba, and they were operating as electrical contractors. We were building contractors, and wasn't long after we got started that we first connected with them, and they very quickly became a preferred subcontractor for our company, and that was the beginning of Mac and I building a relationship, and Mac becoming a lifelong friend for me. And our companies, I think, shared many of the same values, many of the same beliefs. We were both really big in training apprentices, and I know that Russell Smith trained a large amount of the leaders in that electrical industry today, and I'm imagining there's a good few of you here now to say thanks for that today. And I really enjoyed my time with Mac talking about all the various leadership things that we mused over, our training and our values, our beliefs, and all of that sort of really deep and meaningful stuff. But it was great to have someone like that to share that stuff with, because that's something that you don't often get to do. And our first business venture together come from a pretty sticky situation. Both our companies, I think, back in those days we were pretty gung-ho. We weren't too afraid to have a crack at anything that came along, and we'd be quite happy at getting out of our comfort zone. And we were building the Launceston International Hotel today. I think it's the Grand Chancellor in Launceston, and that was certainly way out of our comfort zone, the biggest thing we'd ever tackled. And Russell Smith were there as our subcontractors, but at the same time they were working as subcontractor for the mechanical engineering, a national company, Wildridge and Sinclair. And we were about, I think, 3/4 of the way through the project, and our client went bankrupt. And that was a pretty sticky situation for us. And I'm not sure of the exact timing, but I don't think very long after that, before we got this all sorted, the mechanical subcontractor also, they were a national company, but went into liquidation, and owing Russell Smith, I think, a pretty substantial amount of money. But in the end, the story has a happy ending. The financiers for the project came on board and bailed us all out, and provided the expertise for us to finish it. And with Wildridge and Sinclair, one of the key leaders of that company approached Mac, explained to him that they thought that the business arm of the company in Tasmania was in pretty good shape, and they had some really good people, and they wondered if Mac might have been interested in purchasing it. So Mac did his normal due diligence, came along and had a chat to me and said he thought it was a pretty good deal, and would I be interested in joining together with him to purchase the company. And we did. And Mac and I took on the job of being the two leaders from our respective companies to look after it all, and we managed from afar. We went along to a meeting probably once a month and got told how things were going, and everything seemed to be going along pretty rosy until probably 2-3 years in, we were approached by one of the people from the management company to tell us that things weren't quite as good as what we were led to believe. And after, again, a little bit of due diligence, we realised that they were in some pretty serious trouble, and we needed to find a good amount of money to bail them out, and we did, and that was a really good business lesson for us, I think. We learned all the things you shouldn't do to run a business back then. And so from there on, Mac and I got very much hands-on involved in the company after a pretty major restructure. And a name change. We changed eventually to Degree C today, and we turned that business around, and it became a very successful business, and continues to be so. And in 2006, I think, when Mac and Neville retired, we acquired full ownership of that, and 2-3 years later, I think, after we put a board in place, Mac came back and joined us again as a director for a number of years to help us develop an electrical division for that company that again continues today and does very well. Another of our adventures together was Clementine Lodge. We got connected there through, again, that was another bit of a sticky situation, but we connected there through Rob Ackerson, who was an accountant for the person that had developed the lodge at the time, Darryl Stafford. And I think Darryl was back then a relative of Mac's, and Rob was looking after their finances, and Darryl had got himself into a fair bit of trouble, and Rob wondered if we might have been interested in joining together to purchase the lodge. And after a lot of discussions, we did. And we were, about 2 years later, Richard Bovell came along and joined us as well. And the four of us were there for 15 years. And again, that was another really interesting experience. But along the way, we started progressively adding different cabins, upgrading the facilities, and I think growing it into what I like to think today is a pretty damn good wilderness retreat in Tasmania. But the real outstanding achievement of Mac's from that was the design and installation, project management of a hydroelectric system. It's a pretty remote area, and we weren't able to connect to the grid, power to the grid. It ran off a generator, which was pretty noisy, pretty expensive, and Mac decided that he reckoned he could design a hydroelectric system that we could put in there that would fix all our problems. And he went about doing that, installing it all, getting it in place, and it certainly did. It was a pretty amazing setup, and he put an awful lot of time and effort into it. But that's a really good example, I think, of his expertise in that area. Again, we in 2006, Mac and Richard and I sold our interests in Clementine Lodge to Rob. And look, it probably wasn't the most financially rewarding investment that we've had along the way, but my word, we had some good times up there, and there were an awful lot of good memories that we've taken away from there that we can cherish. So, look, Mac for me was a wonderful friend, a very trusted, reliable business partner. I've got some wonderful memories of our times together that I'll cherish for the rest of my life. And finally, I'd like to finish by passing on my thanks, my gratitude to Marge for her wonderful care and devotion looking after Mac at that final stage in his life. To me, that's what I think a loving relationship is all about. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd invite Mark Temple-Smith to come forward.
As we've heard, the book of Mac's life is fascinating and filled with many wonderful chapters. I've been asked to just talk about one of those chapters, mainly his life in Rotary, and add a few other activities at the end of it. Retirement was never an empty space for Mac. He filled it with very many interests, and as I've said, Rotary was one of those, and he came to Rotary in 2006 when he joined the Rotary Club of Devonport North, introduced by his mate Gerald O'Day. In his time, he held most of the positions in the club. He was a director of, I think it was 3 different committees over the period of time. He was the president Between 2017 and 2018, he was a member of the Motor Show Committee for his entire time with the club, and in 2002 he was made what's known as a Paul Harris Fellow, which is pretty well the highest honour that a club can bestow as its members, and that was in recognition of the incredible contribution that he had made to Rotary for that period of time. Mac loved his part of Rotary. He was a fully engaged member. He rarely missed any meetings. He was always ready to help out in any and all events and working bees. He was universally liked and respected, and whenever he spoke, people listened, because he was one of those people who could articulate what the real issues were and the solutions to those issues. It's fair to say, however, although he was fully engaged in all the activity, his abiding love in Rotary was with the club's motor show. As most here will know, the motor show has become the club's largest event, generates thousands of dollars for charity, attracts annually some 600 or so exhibitors and thousands of visitors. It started life as a swap meet and a car show by club member the late Ian Murcott, and by the time Mac joined the club, it had morphed into a burgeoning motor show, attracting a wide variety of motor vehicles. Mac arriving at the club resulted in the happy alignment of skilled and knowledgeable car people. Many have played and still play a very large part in the motor show's development. However, the success is largely to do with a lot that Mac had to do, that Mac played. When Mac joined, it was a happy alignment of a partnership between Roddo's, Leon, Peck and Mac. It was really a partnership made in heaven. Rod and Leon had buckets of enthusiasm, and most importantly, they had amazing contacts in the car world. Mac not only had cars and motorsports running through his veins, but he was the most amazing organiser and planner. Mac was an absolute stickler for detail, as you've probably gathered from some of the comments made already. He had a great ability to see not only the big picture, but the detail in that picture. Close enough was certainly never good enough for Mac. I know from my earlier business dealings with him that Mac was Mr. Spreadsheet Man. He brought that skill with a full vengeance to the motor show. He devised a huge spreadsheet which covered every aspect of the planning and implementation of what became a mammoth event. And everyone and everything had their place and their duties clearly set out in the columns and cells of his spreadsheet. His eye for detail and his insistence on knowing everything about the event was legendary. And in fact, one member, who shall remain nameless, did suggest at times, perhaps tongue-in-cheek, he was verging on the pedantic at times. However, they did get a certain degree of satisfaction, however, on one occasion. One of the examples of his eye for detail was that every vehicle not only had a space, but the space had to be marked out on the ground, and each marking had to be millimetre perfect. That caused some degree of angst for some members, but Roddo's did relay one story to me that caused a certain amount of wry amusement when they first acquired some wheeled line marking equipment. They were not totally sure how the whole thing worked, and on loading it into the back of Mac's Lexus for the first time, it accidentally discharged a shot of marking paint into the back of Mac's car. As most of us know, Mac's cars are sacred items, and he never agreed to cart that equipment again. Another example of his eye for detail involved bollards. The club acquired stainless steel bollards and chains to put around feature vehicles to keep people's sticky fingers off these prime motor vehicles. I had the dubious honour of installing them, but Mac insisted that I wear white cotton gloves so I did not smear the bollards with my sticky fingers, and that if I did, I had to wipe each one clean with a cotton rag. I dutifully complied, for the first year at least, and to say that I felt slightly self-conscious is an understatement. Mac loved the motor show. He loved working with the motor show committee. He loved spruiking it on the radio, and he loved the event and the camaraderie of the motoring fraternity. He's played a huge part in the success of this motor show as a major event in the Devonport calendar. I will touch upon a few other involvements of Mac with Rotary. He was engaged with most of what the club did. He was a major cog in the club's annual breakfast in the park, as Tracy alluded to. He was always Mr. Electrical, ensuring all things that needed power had it and continued to have it, and at times that was an issue. He was also the director of serving, bringing his organisational skills and spreadsheets to the overstressed cooks and servers to streamline the systems to ensure that 600 breakfasts were cooked and delivered between 7 a.m. and 7:45 a.m. At traffic management events, Mac was always to be found in his eye-vis, either parking cars or manning street closures and placating upset motorists with his wry sense of humour and his uncanny ability to speak to all people from all walks of life. He and Marge were regular attendees at the fellowship events conducted by the club, particularly at the annual fellowship weekends away, some of which he organised. I recall an incident on one weekend we enjoyed at Triabunna, which encapsulates some of the major loves in Mac's life, namely Marge, cars, friends, wine and food. I think I got the order right, but I'm not sure. He and Marge drove down in a very small, sporty Toyota Supra. We enjoyed, with a large group of friends, amongst other things, a lovely lunch on the way down and some winery visits. At one, he purchased several boxes of wine, not an unusual activity for Mac, but his very fancy but functionally useless car was too small and cramped to fit the boxes in. In fact, I don't think he could fit a bottle in, and so I and my functional SUV had to cart the wine home for him. Mac greatly enjoyed many and varied other activities with some of his Rotary friends and with others. I just need to mention bike riding. Where Mac was concerned, you can teach an old dog new tricks, although it's always inappropriate to use old and Mac in the same sentence. He came lately to bike riding, but he came to it with his usual enthusiasm and eye for detail. It started with a group of primarily Rotary and ex-Rotary guys as a casual flat bar bike Wednesday ride to Latrobe for a coffee and back. However, due to the personalities involved, that soon morphed into a more competitive and far longer ride pushed on by the hair-shirted road bike riders in our midst. Mac had a solution to this increased distance and speed. He arrived on an e-bike. He was scoffed at. Real men don't ride e-bikes. However, as was usual, he was ahead of the pack. And in a short time, one half of the peloton was astride e-bikes, and one half still continues to wear their hair shirts. Riding with Mac was always fun, but at times a bit daunting. As most will know, Mac loved to chat. And if you found him next to you on the ride, you would be regaled with an incessant discussion about everything and anything, most of which was lost in the wind blowing away his words, but that never seemed to deter him. There are so many layers of Mac's life to which this afternoon cannot do justice. He was one of the most amazing people that I've had the privilege to know and to have called my friend. You remember people not only by the big things, but by the little things. Some of the little things that I will remember him by are his greeting, "How are you, son?" His response to any problem, "We'll fix this." And his cup of coffee, full-strength cappuccino in a mug, no sprinkles. In the past week, I've met with some fellow Rotarians to talk about Mac, and at our last Thursday meeting, some members gave reflections. In finishing, I want to use their voice by repeating some of the descriptions that were freely given. If I can find it. He was a great encourager. You felt better in his company. He was a great one to put people at ease. He always made you feel special. He was a mentor to me and to others. He wanted to know everything. He kept us honest. He had brilliant people skills. Close enough was never good enough. He was respectful. He always gave credit where credit was due. He liked process. He never closed off options. He had an excellent sense of humour. He was very unpretentious. But most of all, the best testament that I can give is that Mac was just a decent human being. And he will be greatly missed, but frequently talked about with great affection by many.
And to round out this afternoon, I'd like to invite Richard Boval forward.
It wouldn't be a celebration without a glass of red if Mac was involved. At one of the early Clementine meetings, we must have been discussing who was certified for the responsible serving of alcohol. And I think it was in the days when Mac didn't have his fancy earphones, because from that day on, I think he thought he was responsible for serving alcohol. I didn't know Mac before Clementine, and I have to thank Royce for the introduction. But when I got there, we had Rob the accountant, Royce the builder and maintenance man, and Mac kept the lights on. And I thought, what the hell am I doing here? But I pretty soon found out that my responsibility was to help Mac keep the red wine stocks under control. We hit it off pretty well. I think because we didn't have business associations, we brought out the inner kid in each other, and we had lots of conversations because we had a lot of work on stock control. And in those early days, Mac was single, and he was probably pretty lonely. And one of the great problems Mac confessed was the fact that every weekend he had to iron all his shirts for the next week. And now, I didn't realise at the time Mac always wore coats or always wore a jacket. And he explained to me why. He said, if you've got a jacket on, you only have to do the cuffs, the collar and the front. And shortly after that, he got to know Marge. And I think after Marge was able to produce her QSIS 1000 certificate, which is the electrical industry's shirt ironing standard, they got married. At that point, Lemontine was drawing to a close. Mac was looking at rationalising his life and trying to simplify things, and I think I was probably in about the same mode. And it was at one of those stock control meetings that we decided Lemontine's going to close down. We've developed all these new skills in stock control and we really need to take it to a global audience. So we decided we'd start and do a few overseas trips together. We ended up doing 5. I think we have to give this room back to the council by the end of next week, so I'll keep the travel bit fairly brief. But the first trip we did was from Cape Town to Cairo, which was a great trip. The second one was a composite of a range of different travel pieces put together, but we arrived in Frankfurt on Mac's birthday. This was in 2010, and as a treat, we took him down to the French National Auto Museum in Mulhouse, 500 vehicles, which covered the history of motoring. It was a fabulous place, and I'm a bloke that thinks cars are not utes. Mac didn't need a guide. He could walk around and tell me just about every vehicle that was in there. But attached to most museums, as you know, they have a shop. And this had a car shop on the back of it. Now, I've got grandkids and I know how hard they are to get out of a toy shop, but you put Mac in a car shop and you've got a real problem. This was at the stage he'd just completed the garage mahal and he had to plan to decorate it. We were driving around Europe. We'd picked up this little shoebox with 4 wheels. We were travelling for 6 weeks. There were 4 of us, and there was about enough room left in the car for a tissue box if you chucked the box out and put the tissues in. Mac proceeded to fill a 20-foot container, or so it seemed. And most of the stuff you saw on the picture of his garage came from that event. So we loaded the car up, we had stuff jammed in there everywhere, and we proceeded on down the road into Italy. One of the dumbest questions a porter could ask on that whole trip is, "Can I help you with your luggage?" Anyway, we did a walking tour of Tuscany. We went on to Cinque Terre, we went to Monaco, we went into Provence, and we went to a wine school for a weekend because we know that Mac is into continual education. But on those trips you get to learn quite a lot about people and their idiosyncrasies, and one of the major purchases that Mac made at the Mulhouse Car Museum was a Peugeot 4-speed pepper grinder. I don't know whether you noticed, but Mac loved pepper. I've seen in restaurants over there, I've seen waiters get RSI putting pepper onto Mac's plate. The normal thing is they put the pepper on, Mac, a little bit more, and they'd be there, a little bit more. And when it was pretty well black, then he'd start to point to the gaps that weren't black. So the finger would go around the plate. Mac would eat just about anything so long as the bread was white and the lettuce was iceberg. In France, if there's duck on the menu, Mac would eat duck. I think Mac ranked second to bird flu in reducing the French duck population while we were over there. Mac was just good fun to be around. In the times that we had, it was basically if you can make fun of something, if you can ham it up a bit, that's what we did. We went on to do a series of other travel. Mac came, in the Lemontine days, Mac came skiing with us when he couldn't ski, and we all went up. I think that was professional development too, wasn't it, Royce? He learnt to ski in a couple of days and then did something irrational and went off skiing with my 14 and 16-year-old kids. That's something you never do. He survived, a bit bashed around, but in all the time that I was with Mac, it was, you don't worry about anything else that you can't control. Focus on the things that you can control. Mac never had a bad word about anybody. He's a good man. He's a capable man. Or, I don't really know him that well, which is, but if you had a problem, if you wanted to ask Mac's opinion, generally Mac would ask you a series of questions, and by the time you answered the questions, you had your own answer. I think everybody in this room, with everything that you've heard, know that we've lost a wonderful friend, an incredible mate, and just a force of life that is going to be sorely missed. Cheers, Mac. And he's finished his glass.
We'll now watch some photos of Mac from the time that Rick, Stephen, Royce, Mark and Richard have shared.
Mall of Kintyre, on mist rolling in from the sea. My desire is always to be on Mall of Kintyre. Far have I travelled, and much have I seen. Dark distant mountains with valleys of green, past painted deserts, the sun sets on fire as he carries me home to the Mall of Kintyre. Mall of Kintyre, oh mist rolling in from the sea. My desire is always to be here, oh Mall of Kintyre. Well, it's alright, riding around in the breeze. Well, it's alright, if you live the life you please. Well, it's alright, doing the best you can. Well, it's alright, as long as you lend a hand. You can sit around and wait for the phone to ring, waiting for someone to tell you everything. Sit around and wonder what tomorrow will bring. Maybe a diamond ring. Well, it's alright, even if they say you're wrong. Well, it's alright, sometimes you gotta be strong. Well, it's alright, as long as you got somewhere to lay. Well, it's alright, every day is Judgment Day. Maybe somewhere down the road away, you'll think of me and wonder where I am these days. Maybe somewhere down the road when somebody plays Purple Haze. Well, it's alright, even when push comes to shove. Well, it's alright, if you got someone to love. Well, it's alright, everything will work out fine. Well, it's alright, we're going to the end of the line. Don't have to be ashamed of the car I drive. I'm just glad to be here, happy to be alive. And it don't matter if you're by my side, I'm satisfied. Well, it's alright, even if you're old and gray. Well, it's alright, you still got something to say. Well, it's alright, remember to live and let live. Well, it's alright, the best you can do is forgive. Well, it's alright, riding around on the breeze. Well, it's alright, if you live the life you please. Well, it's alright, even if the sun don't shine. Well, it's alright, we're going to the end of the line.
As we now come to the end of our formal celebration of Mac's life, I'd like to remind you all to join the family and each other as you share your own memories and stories of Mac after we've concluded here. Preferably with a drink in your hand, maybe a red if you like. I'll share with you now the poem that's in your booklet called He Is Gone that the family have chosen. You can shed tears that he is gone, or you can smile because he has lived. You can close your eyes and pray that he will come back, or you can open your eyes and see all that he has left. Your heart can be empty because you can't see him, or you can be full of the love that you shared. You can turn your back on tomorrow and live yesterday, or you can be happy for tomorrow because of yesterday. You can remember him and only that he is gone, or you can cherish his memory and let it live on. You can cry and close your mind, be empty and turn your back, or you can do what he would want. Smile, open your eyes, love, and go on. Thank you for being here, and thank you for sharing a part of Mac's life, for sharing your memories and supporting the family and each other during this time. I know that you'll think of Mac often and remember him with a smile. It's only appropriate that we finish today with Tina Turner. The family like to think that Mac will have found her and made her serenade him with the following song, The Best.